When April and Frank meet at a party, April tells Frank that she thinks he's perhaps the most interesting and creative man she's ever met. It's post-World War II. Frank served in the war, so he's seen a bit of the world. He's been to Paris, for example. He's a little bit full of himself. April is young and pretty. They fall in love and they get married. And she, like Frank, is convinced right from the start that they are not like the rest of the deluded masses. It's the 1950s. And they know that they are above the rush to suburbia, the 2 kids, a dog, and a solid pension. They both have bigger plans. Sure, on the outside, their lives might look like the suburban life. They do indeed end up in suburbia with 2 kids and a manicured lawn. Frank does join the hordes of other men in 3-piece suits and a hat, streaming to the inner city to their meaningless office jobs. In Frank's case, it's office machines. He's working for the same company that his father worked for, but it's temporary in Frank's mind. He returns home every night, briefcase in hand, to an awaiting martini that his wife has lovingly prepared. And on the weekends, they have their favorite couples over and critique the very lifestyles that they are rapidly becoming caricatures of. They're above it all. They have big plans. This is all temporary, Frank assures himself. April believes it, counts on it, in fact. But it's the 1950s. The beatnik generation has not yet emerged. Father still knows best. There is yet no space for April's creative yearnings to be more. She knows inside she's more than the roles that society has given her. She's more than mother. She's more than wife. She's even joined a local theater company. It's a little bit beneath her, but it at least keeps her hand in the game. Keeps her creativity flowing. But when the first community play tanks, April and Frank have their first fight, the first of what is to be many fights, as the suburban myth comes crashing down all around them. April needs to believe that Frank is as committed to something more for their lives as she is. Over ubiquitous martinis and cigarettes. What is that about the 50s? This is the constant source of conversation. She props Frank up, assuring him, you're creative, you're brilliant, because Frank is her only ticket out of this. But Frank can't figure out what the alternative might be. Desperation and frustration begin to slowly simmer within both of them. And so one day, April hatches a plan. She cooks her husband his favorite meal and announces over dinner that at this time next year, they will be in Paris, France. Why not? What's stopping them after all? In Paris, women can get good-paying jobs. She'll be able to go to work. Frank will finally be able to find himself. Who cares if it's a role reversal? This is Europe. It doesn't matter in Europe. At first, Frank is dubious. What about the pension? What's he supposed to do while she's going to work? And what kind of a man allows his wife to go to work while he stays at home? But eventually, Frank comes around. They announce to the whole world that they're loading up the kids, cashing in their chips, and buying a one-way ticket to Paris, France. But secretly, Frank harbors doubts about the plan, primarily doubts about himself. He begins to realize that his bravado about being above the rest of the crowds, being more creative, more innovative, may be just that bravado. It's true, he has a certain perspective on it. He's able to stand back and critique this culture. He's outside of it. But it's not at all clear to him what he's inside of, or what is inside of him that would enable to bring this vision off exactly. And so when an offer comes to get into the budding new field of computers, this becomes Frank's secret default plan. He won't need to go through with this Paris thing and risk discovering that he actually isn't all that different than all the other men on the block. And then April has an unexpected pregnancy. She wants an abortion so that it won't get in the way of their dreams. But Frank feigns repulsion at this idea. He wants himself, in truth, no more children. He doesn't even know the 2 children he has. They are strangers that he steps over on Saturday morning while they're playing in the living room, wondering where they came from. But he will use the pregnancy as his way out of the dream. He will feign moral indignation at the idea of abortion. And he will launch a step-by-step rational plan to persuade April about the folly of the abortion. He will use every piece of conventional wisdom available to him in the 1950s to turn away from this dream. Frank turns truly into Father Knows Best. But it's disingenuous. April knows it, and she begins to detest him. And from this point forward, the film, Revolutionary Road, turns very dark. The film is an adaptation of Richard Yates' now classic novel by the same name. And I was so moved by the film that I went out immediately, I bought the novel, and I read it, and it also is a fabulous book. So why was it so moving to me? And I came up with 3 reasons. First of all, I walked out of the film and I got it at an even deeper level. That this journey towards wholeness of being, towards freedom for women in particular, has been so much more difficult in so many ways than it has been for men. I felt compassion for women. Frank had some options. I'm not saying that he wasn't bound by the cultural and societal roles and norms of what it meant to be a man, but April, it seemed to me, was utterly dependent on Frank being able to change. Frank was her future as well, and he couldn't pull through. So I felt for women, especially in this period of time. The second reason that I think I was so moved by it, because I thought about my own mother, who was the exact same age as April Wheeler in the film, and by the time she was April's age, she already had 3 children under the age of 5. What were her options? Right? What did she do with that urge to transcend the definitions that were placed upon her about what it meant to be a woman by culture and by society? And so it just made me curious about my mother's story, and I'm sure I'll find out more about that after she reads the sermon. Finally, the film is a poignant portrayal of what, in the prayer earlier this morning, was referred to as the blessed unrest. This evolutionary urge at the heart of life to transcend the status quo and discover the deeper dimensions of freedom and fullness of life. And I've talked about this before, but this is an evolutionary urging that never stops. There's something, and I attribute this yearning to spirit. To this, the spirit is in this animating urge to transcend the status quo, because spirit wants to grow into fullness of being. Fullness of freedom. It's a terrible, in one sense, it's a terrible freedom that we're drawn to, because it's going to cost us so much.